You gonna say something?
Hello and welcome back to TianquiztliCreations podcast. My name is Elle, your host, and today we have Mr. Colorz Estrada. How are you, Colors?
I'm very good, excited for today's topic. We have
And we
a
have,
special
oh,
guest.
sorry, Colors.
I was
You're
gonna say we have
jumping.
a special guest.
I know you're jumping in my lane.
Okay,
You're
go
too
ahead.
excited. We have special guest, Mr. Jonn Molina. How are you doing, John?
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Happy to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
Of
Awesome.
course. And for all that have been listening to us, we like to feature special guests. Usually every week, we're trying to keep it every week. Different backgrounds and actually different cities at this point. We had Shu last week who was in Georgia, and we have John today who is out of Texas. So
Good old Texas.
I
Yes.
know. I know, and he's telling us that it's really hot out there. So I was gonna
Yeah.
say I miss it, but I don't miss it.
I'm indoors in my AC, so I'm not missing it either.
I mean, here in Virginia, like it gets warm, and I think really what gets me because we live like by surrounded by woods. What gets me are the bugs and the animals that come
Oof.
out here. So the other day, my dad was like, there was this huge rat-looking thing out in the back, and he's like, I think it lives out there, so he followed it. And I said that could have had rabies. I wouldn't have followed it into its home, but he has a home back there. And I said, that's disgusting.
That's not a rat. That's a possum.
No, he said it wasn't a possum, some kind of like critter thing. I'm like, was it a raccoon? He said it was the size of a raccoon, but it wasn't a raccoon. So who knows?
That's a chupacabras
Yeah. All right,
in
guys. So let's
Virginia.
get in Virginia. Let's get into it. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking about urban legends. So what is maybe one of y'all's favorite urban legends, or maybe one that really creeped you out as a kid?
Let's
I'll go
start with
first.
John. Let's
Yeah,
start
I
with John.
have a memory from when I was in a probably second or third grade back in the day, a long time ago. But I went to religious school, and they did the most. So they would have like weird sessions where they would call the students in and warns us about anything that seemed to be that demonic or satanic at the time. Satanic panic was the height of the 80s. So that's how I was raised. But one of the things I remember people talking about was how if you had a Smurf doll or a Smurf toy, it would come alive at night and take your eyeballs and put them on. So there's a story that would go around that this girl died because her Smurfette doll woke up in the middle of the night, and her parents came to get her in the morning, and she just saw her body with no eyes, and the eyes were on this Smurfette doll, and we all believed it. We were so scared. I was so scared. I went home and I had a Smurf cereal, and I took the price inside the cereal, which was this little pin with a Smurf head on it, and I hid it inside my mom's sewing kit and put it way up high in the closet so it wouldn't come get me.
He should have
That
just
sounds
thrown
so
it away
cool.
by that time.
That's the kind of stuff we used to like tell around, around lunchtime. We'd creep each other out. But yeah, we really thought that was for real. Like,
I feel like they're already like these magical, weird creatures, and yeah, that probably added on to the terror of them.
yeah.
For me, I think that it's a few, but one of the ones that always stuck with me was growing up. Whenever we would go trick or treating, my mom would be very serious about checking our candy before we ate it. So our bags, and it's like a lot of like Hispanic families, like especially moms, are like, "Fine, go trick or treating. Let me see your bag of candy." And so I would ask her. You would even see on the news. They would put the candy through like metal detectors on the news.
Hmm.
And so I remember I asked her, I said, well, mom, what would they do with the candy? When she's like, oh, they can, one was like, they could put drugs in there, it could lace it with drugs. The other one was like, they could put razor blades.
Yeah,
And to me
famous
was
razor
like
blades.
out, exactly. It was outlandish. I'm like, who would take the time, one, to put drugs in candy? And then two, like who would want to put razor blades and things, right? And I completely forgot about that until I saw the Chucky, the season 1 of Chucky, like maybe sometime last year. And one of the episodes, he does that to someone. Like he sneaks a razor blade into an apple, and they bite into
Mhm.
it. And of course, like they cut like the inside of their mouths, and it just like brought all this like childhood like trauma, thinking like someone's gonna try and kill me and my candy.
We heard that growing up too. Actually, we would check our
Yeah.
candy.
No, but I mean, like I actually remember hearing about it last year. Um, that people had found like razor blades, or they had like, oh, somebody had put laced candy, or so when the kids would like eat it, they'll get high, or they will even be doing like marijuana candy, so they were giving that out. So the kids were like knocked out after a
Can you
while.
imagine?
But
I
still,
mean,
don't do that.
yeah,
That's horrible.
no, I can't imagine there were too many people, giving CBD candy or laced, weed candy, because it's
Yeah.
expensive. Even if it was a prank, I don't see people doing that. you know,
I mean,
like
like I have
jars
an
of CBD
addiction.
stuff.
For
I
real.
have an addiction,
Yeah,
and I don't want to share it.
yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
funny.
so part of the the idea of the whole urban legend, and now I guess they're more known like creepypastas, right? Which was a big thing too a few years ago, and they're still coming out with all these different crazy horror themed stories. TikTok, Reddit, they have all kinds of stories, right?
Mhm.
Well, really, the reality is that they stemmed from a real horror, right? So, from real people who either kidnap children or kill them, or, real events. And one of those documentaries, I mean, there's so many, but one of the documentaries that really stuck with me was one that was called Cropsey. These two directors go into a small town where they're from, and they're talking about a serial killer who actually kidnapped children and killed them, and how after people in the city or the town learned about him, all these urban legends like came forward about him, and no one even really knew what was real and what wasn't real anymore. He was just like the boogeyman of the town.
All the time.
Exactly. And Colorz, I know you did a little bit of research for us. Tell us more about this serial killer or this killer.
So this serial killer, his name is Andrew Rand. He was very. He was an evil person. So technically, one of his like his best. What would you say? Like his inspiration was Ted Bundy. He even said it when he got arrested. He said, "I'm kind of close to like what Ted Bundy is. We both drive kind of the same cars. I think it was a Volkswagen. They both had Volkswagen, and they both actually, he said his thing was a woman. Like he kidnapped women, raped them, whatever. And my thing was children. So that was very creepy to me to hear that. So yeah, he worked in a mental hospital with disability children, and he would just after the mental hospital or the school closed, he started kidnapping kids, and yeah, he will bury them underneath the building. So it
Wow.
started
That's
with
crazy.
one started with a 5-year-old. I think the 5-year-old's name was Alice Pereira. I'm sorry if I'm not saying her name right, but yeah, it started in July 1972. That's when he started actually doing his first. That was his first victim. So a lot of people said he had a hook for a hand, but when you see the pictures, he doesn't have a hook for a hand. He's just a regular guy. He just looks really creepy. His eyes are just like really wide and in court, and yeah, it's very eerie to see. So, um, yeah, that's him. I don't know if there's anything else that you want me to say about him, but he
You
did
know,
scare a lot of
when
kids.
when you said hook, you know what it immediately brought the image of? Candyman. Another good urban legend movie based out of Cabrini Green in Chicago. And I know recently there was like a not a remake, but maybe they just like redid the story or something or continued the story. But that's exactly what I mean. You know, that movie Canyon was also based on urban legend. The whole idea was that there was a reporter, or was it a teacher? I think
It
it
was a
was a
reporter.
teacher. A reporter, okay. And she was doing this, news story on this urban legend that came out of Cabrini Green, the projects. Um, Growing up, I remember actually, not I didn't live there. I was fortunate enough not to live there, but I remember going through that area of town where there was a lot of homelessness, a lot of low income families, and if you see the original movie that was made in the 90s, exactly how it looks there is how it looked, just
Oh
complete
wow.
poverty, very sad. Um, and what they started doing, was they started just building new things around it without really resolving the problem. But that's another good movie that, again, people built on someone was there hurting people, killing them, and they built this whole boogeyman that didn't really exist, right?
Yeah, it was. I remember you talking about Chicago, right? Like I think it was a Division Street when you go straight down, and there is
It
like
was
some
definitely
kind of
South
a
Side.
yeah, it was somewhere around there, and yeah, there was two these buildings. It was a project. It was called the projects, and the reason why it was called the projects, it was a project for the African Americans to live together in this community, and it was a project of the government, which they wanted to resolve that whole thing about homeless people and people with low income. So that's why it was called a project. But yeah, I remember seeing those buildings, and I remember when they took them down too because there was nobody there. Um, but it was a very creepy place to just pass by because it's all you see is gang members and like drug addicts outside, and it's kind of sad. But the crazy part about it, development was going around. Urban City was still going around, and it was just this place in the middle of just people, not going anywhere.
Wow.
Exactly.
It sounds kind of like in Puerto Rico growing up, they had some, the poorer areas of town where there were apartment buildings called caseríos, but they weren't like well maintained or anything like that. So like the lower income people lived there. A lot of drug deals went down there. A lot of shady business, and it's just, I guess every place has something like that. And from there, you do hear weird stories about, oh, that old man that kidnapped so and so, or like even all the way to supernatural stuff, like, oh, if you go to this place where someone died, you can hear the ghost at night. There's always something about those places because of the oppressive atmosphere that it lends itself to breeding campfire style stories at night. Just I feel it's just a way for people to address their own anxieties about living there. Kind of the same reason why people go to see horror movies now, is just to kind of, it seems like a safe way to deal with your own anxieties about the world. But when you live in those places, your imagination kind of goes into overdrive, especially at night, and you start hearing noises or like actual fights or gangbang noises around you, and you just start over time building like out your own mythology of what those things mean, especially if you're younger. And then when tragic things do happen afterwards, you always have the older people in the community attributing those things to like superstitious folklore or things like that, and then it just snowballs into more and more uh folklore for the area, which becomes urban legends, right?
Exactly. At the
Yeah.
end, it's so hard to even know what was real and what wasn't at that point.
Hmm.
And it's so hard to imagine because Puerto Rico is such a small island that there would be a case of homelessness. How do they get there? It's like, where does it?
Hmm. I haven't been there in a while. I just came from there in February to visit family, and before that, I haven't been there in like 10 years. So I was surprised to actually see some good things. Like they built up the highway a lot more. There's a little bit of development in areas, and of course, the tourist parts of town look better now after the Hurricane Maria and all that.
Oh,
But there's still very poor areas um, that are too slow to recover because no funds are reaching to those areas. So the people just do what they can on their own, which isn't much, although they've learned by now, after many decades of being oppressed, being a colony of the United States, um, that they have to rely on is each other and whatever natural resources they have, or whatever help they can get from family and things like that. But you know, I'm always surprised by the resilience of Puerto Rican people when they're in dire straits. Um, but it's also funny how certain parts of town that I grew up in and when I go to visit look exactly the same. And especially in the area my grandparents live, when I go to see him, every time I go down his little street, the same families have been there for 40, 50 years. The same houses look the same. It's just wild to me. And my cousin who lives there, as we drove around, we just crossed the block, one block over to go somewhere to eat. And he's like, "Oh, I'd never come here. They'll steal your car if you come this way. There's too much crime this way." I'm like, "But you live like 6 minutes away. What do you mean you never come? It's what like they know exactly what areas of town to avoid and where to stay, and because they become like each neighborhood becomes like a centralized location under the watchful eye of a particular family or group of people, not necessarily all crime related, but over time they become so territorial about those things that it's like you have to get permission to be there in a way.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
or if they don't know you or whatever, they'll look at you weird, and then you just put a target on yourself just by being there if you're just a stranger.
Oh,
And so those areas that breed, in my mind, what's the word I'm looking for? Not like insecurity, but like distrust in people, right?
Yeah.
Lends itself again to how they communicate about other parts of town. Oh, well, over there they do this, over there they do this. And those things over time can become sort of like urban legendy type stuff.
exactly.
Like
Okay.
over there is where they steal the cars. Like that, whether or not that's true, now you have that reputation, right? And
I do.
that's how urban legends happen.
Exactly. Exactly that. And you know, there's so many shows right now. You said Supernatural, and it really again triggered like the first few seasons of Supernatural were solely based on urban legends. They had La Llorona, they had the lady who would come and haunt the bridge she jumped off of years ago. If you go to Mexico, I kid you not, you get in a taxi and all the taxi men talk about a ghost woman who drives at night. All of
Yeah.
them. So there's one lady who goes all around Mexico, ghost lady, and she gets in these taxis because all of them tell you the same thing, you know. And who's to say, you know, maybe someone tragically did die, and you know they do haunt the taxis. I don't know, but I guess now they're gonna haunt Uber because Uber's pretty big out here.
I guess so, huh? We'll see how those legends change. Yeah, growing up, my grandpa, when we lived in this house in Puerto Rico, I remember him telling us a story about a ghost hitchhiker and somebody that supposedly he picked up that by the time he got somewhere, the person disappeared. So even as far back as I remember, we heard stories like that, you know?
Exactly.
And even then, here when I came to Texas and I was in high school, people would still repeat the same stories. Like it's just, and this is pre-internet, mind you. So it's interesting how pre-internet, how the heck do these urban legends get spread around so fast?
It's called word of mouth, man. Word of mouth.
Yeah,
It is.
and it's the same, different variations on the same theme, no matter where you go, right?
Exactly. I mean, even more recently, there was an episode on Unsolved Mysteries about this hurricane that hit this place, I think in Central Asia or somewhere in Asia. And the victims of this like hurricane or this, you know, terrible weather event, like they were getting into people's cars or like taxis, and you know, taxi men were like, nobody was there. They just wanted to go home. And it makes it really sad because it's like, is it a way for people to cope, like you said, with certain trauma, with certain things, you know?
It
Like
could
especially
be.
yeah, when
Well,
someone like passes away, like it kind of
yeah, I was gonna say like right now, I think we're watching an urban legend get created in front of our very eyes because of the smiley face killer in Chicago and all the
oh
bodies
my
that keep turning
gosh.
up from the river. Like there's rumors that there's a serial killer in Chicago. There's a serial killer in Austin, Texas, close by where I live, because these bodies of young men in their 30s keep showing up, getting pulled out of the river, and last seen coming out of a bar drunk, and then they disappear, and then they pull them out of the river, whatever local water source. Over here is Lake Ladybird next to Rainy Street, which is by 6th
Right.
Street. They found I don't know how many bodies. And I'm like, okay, the cops always say it's just the way it is when young men drink and they don't know their way around and they fall into the water. Okay, yeah, it could be that for maybe one or two. When you have 8 or 9 bodies within a certain amount of time, it seems a bit
Exactly.
suspicious. So for me, I didn't know that there was
They all
a
keep
name
tripping on the
already
same rock.
for the one in Chicago that they found the smiley face graffiti art next to some of the locations, and that's why they call the people themselves, not like the cops, have just taken it upon themselves to call him the smiley face killer. I doubt very much that it's related to what's happening in Texas, and it could very well be just something that there's like somebody said on TikTok. Oh, and the street where these are happening, there's is really dark. There's no lights, so maybe people could have gotten lost or whatever. But I'm like, yeah, or maybe there's a serial killer. I don't know. Either way,
Right.
I'm not going to be going anywhere near there in the near future.
Yeah.
And that's true. Actually, I totally forgot because I heard about the smiley face killer years ago, but now it's like almost happening again. Like I
Oh,
remember this was like, yeah. So I think I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research on that because I remember hearing about it, but it was a while ago.
yeah. It seems strange. Someone on TikTok was saying that someone approached them after they left the club and offered them a ride and pretended to be an Uber, but they're like got a weird feeling and just left. They had their car, they just have parked far away.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know. I think someone's finding these guys and doing something to them.
Targeting them for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
But
and
if
it's so
that's
sad.
resolved, I'm sorry, I was going to say if that crime ever gets resolved or not, we already have an urban legend around it already. And it does
Smiley
serve a
face killer.
purpose. It serves a purpose because it is a boogeyman for nowadays for a particular group of people to be like, hey, be careful. Don't go over there or the smiley face killer will get you or whatever. To me, it does serve a purpose in the culture to have those kinds of stories because it's a way of the community to protect itself or self police itself when the authorities don't want to really do their job.
Caution tales.
Yep, it falls into that category. But it's wild that we're literally watching it happen online, and people are dedicating themselves to running whole channels about keeping up with that story. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops in the future.
That's true. With social media, it is kind of hard to really form an urban legend without a resolution or, because there's so many people who become, scientific, what do you want to call them? Investigators now. Like everyone's an investigator online. So
Right.
like, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like there's a few documentaries on Netflix now. Like there was the one about the cat and
Oh
all these
yeah.
people came together and they figured out where this killer was, or like I guess the person who killed the cat. I don't know what else he was doing. I can't remember, but all these people came together online and resolved the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's good sometimes it's not so good because they may intervene in a way that it's actually, not doing any good to the investigation on the legal
Right.
side.
It could be a
So,
hindrance or it could be
mhm,
an aid, depending if you when you
mhm,
start crowdsourcing. It's like, I guess how you say it,
mhm.
for clues from just random people who can all just jump on it. Well, I saw this, I saw that. I feel like if it's done in a timely, organized way, it can be beneficial. But if it's just people doing it for clout, then it just starts spreading misinformation just to hop on a trend. You
Mhm.
know?
Honestly, I see that all the time on TikTok sometimes, and I just not interested. Not it because I do feel like some people just get on the trend of it. They don't really care about the actual issue that's abroad. They just want to make sure people are watching and sharing and whatever. You know what I mean? So it's not
Yeah.
always like things.
Yeah, it's not always done from the kindness of their heart. Like, unless it's like the family of one of the victims, then it would make sense, right? Because they'll put up a GoFundMe or they'll put up like, please our DMs are open if you have any tips. Sometimes that's the way to get a crime solved. Is the family gets involved and they go with their story online, but then it's like they have a personal stake. If you're just some random from the internet, what's your interest in it? What's your personal stake in this spreading the story? Especially if it's about a crime that's active or happening right now still, like that seems weird. Like you're just an ambulance chaser at this point. Like you're just out here for clout. But
Exactly.
it's still interesting and it does add to the conversation overall of like, why are we so drawn to these things? Because we have access to them as they're happening where before we didn't.
Mhm.
It's like those
That's
people
right.
who like they download the police radio apps and they listen in on the police calls because they're bored
Yeah.
and they try to catch like a crime as it's happening. It's like that, but on TikTok.
That's true. That's true. I don't know how people do that. Like people do have those kinds of apps now. For me, I feel like I would have anxiety all the time, knowing
Right?
exactly what's going on in my city every second of the day. It would give me anxiety. It doesn't
No,
take
for
much,
real.
but
Yeah, ignorance
Yeah.
is bliss. Ignorance is bliss.
oh, no. No, I definitely hope that there's some development into those stories because I did start
Yeah,
hearing a lot more and it's sad. People are just trying to live
very.
their life. And
Yeah.
after COVID, like why can't we go and have a good time and not get murdered or kidnapped? Like, come on.
Like definitely practice the buddy system. Let people know where you're at, where you're going. These are not the times to be playing around and trying to be a hero at night and trying to be a lone ranger. Like, no. Like, if nothing
Exactly.
else, have a plan.
You should have a curfew for yourself.
For yourself, for real. I'm trying to be in bed by 11 o'clock at night. Don't ask me to go nowhere.
True. It's true. And that's one thing here. It's like it's so dark here at night. So after a certain time when the sun is coming down, I want to be home. Like I don't want to be out there. I don't want to have to come in these weird roads back home. Especially now with my dad, because he doesn't know how to he can't drive at night. He can't see very well anymore. So we don't want to do that.
Oh my gosh, that reminds me of the urban legend. I think it's an urban legend where if you were driving at night and someone flashed their lights at you, don't flash your lights back because there was like a gang initiation and they're looking
That's
to see.
Chicago. That's
Yeah,
Chicago.
I've heard that growing up in Hawaii and different places. They would say that in a lot of places. So I'm like, I wonder if that was true, if that was just an urban
It was
legend.
true. It's
I don't
true.
know if that's
I
true
lived it.
because I
I
heard it in
lived it.
Hawaii
I
too,
lived
and
it.
it's like,
So I
come
know it's
on.
true. I'm gonna
Okay,
be
So
honest
okay.
with you. I lived it my life, and it is true.
so
I
you
was
All right,
stop.
not
tell
with
us,
the
tell
right.
us, tell us
I
what
was
happened.
not with the. I was not with the right people at the right time, and it happens, man. It's like if
Mm,
what I was in a vehicle where they didn't have the lights on. And that was like a kind of like an initiation thing. I never went through it. I got scared. I
ooh,
was like, this is not my life, man.
mm-mm.
It's when I was younger and I was hanging around with the wrong crew, and that was the main thing. Like, hey, we're gonna go drive around this car with the lights off, and whoever flashes their lights, if the person who flashes your light is telling you you have your lights off, so you have to turn it on. They're just warning you because you can get stopped by
Mm.
the cops and whatever. But to them, it's like random. It's like, okay, whoever does it, let's go. We gotta go get them, and that's like an initiation and like proving your word to this gang that you, no matter what it
Mm.
is, what time it is, you gotta be down with it. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I never got involved into it, but I was like, let me get off this car
Mm.
real quick.
Well, there you go. I guess we have first-hand account that urban legend
It
is
is
real.
this Chico Malo over here. I don't know. It's to me.
There's a
But
lot of things
This
no
is
one's gonna
all
know.
allegedly and for entertainment purposes only.
right,
Allegedly.
No,
like
no, but I never really got to, and not that I never really got to do it. I never wanted to be part of that. I just thought it was cool hanging around with some kids that were like, experimenting on stuff, and I was like, but I knew my line. I knew when to draw the line. I was like, yeah, this is not for me.
It makes me
So
want, yeah, for real. It does make me wonder. Okay, like if once these things start happening, which came first, the urban legend or the thing? Like, were they copying the urban legend, or did the urban legend come from this gang, so alleged gang-related activity? Like, once again, it's the chicken and the egg scenario to me in my head. Like, but to me, it's like you never will find out because the whole point of folklore is that's like you said, word of mouth. It's not documented somewhere.
it's
Like I
called
was the
chisme.
first person. I was the first person to spread this story. Now, nowadays online, you probably can find some post on Reddit and be able to date it and be like, "Oh, this is where this rumor started spreading." But before, like it was all word of mouth before the internet. Then yeah, you didn't know which came first. But now, for better or worse, it is a real thing. See?
Yeah.
So sometimes
Exactly.
those nightmares can manifest into reality, unfortunately.
Yeah. I
Seriously.
mean,
It's like now we're out here giving them ideas. And then there's copycat, whether it's a kidnapper or a serial killer, now they're trying to copycat whoever came before them. Like, it's
Hmm.
scary thought.
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
I'm more
Just
scared of like the
this
lone.
is for entertainment only.
Yeah, I was thinking. We all have this thing in our head about the serial killer. Like, be careful, the boogeyman will get you. But like statistically, serial killers are really rare. Like there's, like you're not gonna. You're it's very not high chances you're gonna get killed by a serial killer. You know what I'm saying? Like you're more likely to get killed by your domestic partner or a romantic partner or a business partner or somebody you know,
Okay.
a pissed off neighbor, than you are by some stranger like that's gonna grab you in the middle of the night. Like, that's not really gonna happen to you
Yeah.
unless you just putting yourself out there and like really looking for it. In my opinion, uh, no, that's not right. Let me not victim blame. But it's weird. It's not gonna happen to you. But now I'm
Yeah.
wondering if it's gonna have the same effect where it's like the more people talk about it, the more it's gonna manifest in real life. Like, oh, now we do have a serial killer because some lunatic started hearing this rumor and wanted to make it be true, like copycat killers, you know. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like
Exactly.
it's a two-edged sword. The spread of information is a two-edged sword because the more you're aware of it and it's in the zeitgeist, the more, in my opinion, it's likely to happen. But then, how else are you going to shed light if it's actually happening? So it's a double-edged
Yeah.
sword, you know.
Hmm.
That's how truth might
Honest.
get spread.
Well, I was gonna say with Colorz, in his case, you're more likely to poison yourself from eating random flowers and plants than a serial killer getting you. I know that for a fact. This man just eats random stuff every time we go out there,
I'm
or
more
picks up a.
scared of get. Yeah. Yeah. I put a lot of stuff in my mouth.
Just get you a get you a herbalist book, get you a field book of what's dangerous to eat and not eat, and just carry it with you wherever you go.
I know, right? I should. But it all started with like flowers. I don't know, roses, and it just like after one petal, I was to smell it, and then like, let me see what it tastes like. That could have been me right there.
There's a lot of edible flowers. I actually did buy an herbalist book. I was surprised at how many wildflowers and things are edible and things like that. So
Yeah, I mean, you don't ever know. Like, I was doing some exercise around here, and there's a dandelion. There's dandelions everywhere here.
yeah,
Those are good for you. Was that
they are very
chamomile
good
tea?
for you. Yeah,
Isn't that
dandelion. No, no, no. The chamomile is a whole different plant. Dandelion
okay?
itself, though, the whole plant. You can eat the whole plant. You can eat the flower. You can eat the stalk and leaves. And you can eat the root.
Yeah.
You can take the root and dry it and make like a ground tea out of it, like almost like a
Hmm.
chicory tasting tea. You can take the stalk and leaves and boil them or fry them however you want, just like greens, and get lots of antioxidants from them. Yeah, it's wild. But that's the thing, we don't, unless you read it about it, you're not really gonna know these things. It's like if we're urban, we're not gonna know these things necessarily unless you're raised in the countryside, you know. But
Exactly.
yeah,
Well,
Yeah,
there
we
you
were.
have it, guys. A little bit of dandelion. What is it? Herbalist talk here among our
so
urban
we
legends.
went from an urban legend to herbalist, from urban legends to herbalist lore.
What
There we
it
go.
is.
I think we were just trying to find a positive topic because it is a
Yeah,
scary
it's
topic.
always like that.
I
It's
sca-
always like
I
that.
scared myself.
Guys, any last minute thoughts?
Hmm. Just don't go anywhere
Ah,
alone at night and let people know where you're at. If you're gonna get drunk, have your Uber and stuff ready to go beforehand. Don't accept rides from strangers, even if you're 30 years old or older. There's always a chance something bad will happen. Just remember that.
yeah, try not to take a chance while you're drinking or
Yeah,
smoking or whatever. Just
nah.
try to stay away from negative people. Just do your thing, enjoy your life. But just be careful. Be
Preferably in a
careful what you
well-lit place, surrounded by
do. Not
surrounded by easy
fire.
access to Wi-Fi and kind strangers.
There you have it, guys. So make sure you stay safe, be vigilant, and come back and listen to another episode of TianquiztliCreations podcast. Have a great day, y'all.
Bye, guys.
Bye.